Isabelle, welcome back to the show. This is now round 2 that you've been on here. You're one of the OG win-win guests. So thank you for coming back. Super excited to have you because Isabelle just released her first ever book, Rad Future. Can confirm, this is my first time holding it. It is beautiful, and that's just the outside. The inside's even better. So to get us started, can you tell us why nuclear energy is a win-win?
I think that nuclear is a win-win because it's a technology that can give us a bunch of clean electricity using less resources. So I truly think it's a win-win because it can provide electricity for growth, for improving human lives, while at the same time reducing our impact on the environment.
Because it feels like one of the big tensions in our world right now is this idea of like, are we going towards radical abundance? Or is that not possible? And should we be therefore trying to do degrowth? And I think the sort of it feels to me like the core sort of vibe of your book is one of like, no, radical abundance is possible. We just have to figure out how to do it. Would you agree with that?
Well, it depends on what you mean by radical abundance in terms of, is everybody flying private planes and just, having electricity on at their homes 24/7? I mean, I guess there is a limit. The truth is we don't know what that limit is. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I are on the side of abundance versus degrowth, because in previous times, people have made predictions that we would run out of food by the 1990s, that we would run out of electricity by a certain amount. And time after time, those predictions just turn out to be wrong. So the truth is we don't know what the limits of the planet are. However, that doesn't mean that there are no limits. So that's, I think, an ongoing conversation that I'm not going to pretend I know the answer to. What I do know is that if we're talking about human lives, which is what I care about, there is a lot of proof that higher access to electricity or higher electricity consumption leads to better lives. I mean, you can see this in every single country, right? And for me, it's something that I personally felt. I don't just understand the data. I felt it because I grew up in a very small town in the south of Brazil. And, back then, my family was middle class. But even being middle class, you didn't have access to certain things like air conditioning, dishwashing machines, or even laundry machines. Or heaters for that matter. I'm from a part of Brazil that gets extremely hot in the summer and very, very cold in the winter.
Wait, summer in Brazil gets cold?
Very cold.
Really?
Well, not like negative. So it does get down to -4 Celsius.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's legit
Pretty
cold.
cold. Yeah.
In my head, Brazil is like this sort of tropical paradise all the time.
Yes, I know. Yeah. So Brazil's a huge country, obviously. We have everything. We have desert, we have swamp, we have obviously like the super lush Amazon forest. When people think of Brazil, they think of Rio de Janeiro. So the beach, very tropical.
Yeah, everyone wearing nothing and running around, tanned bodies, having a nice time.
It's literally all we do all day long. But I'm from the south, which is the last state in Brazil, and it's closer to Uruguay and Argentina. And it gets very, very cold in the winter. So it goes down to like 0 Celsius, sometimes -4, and so on. And those are not crazy temperatures, right? Some places in the United States get down to like -25. And so...
No, but you need heating.
You need heating.
You definitely need heating.
And we don't have it. But not only that, the homes are not built for that. So they have, like a lot of the homes are built with that kitchen, like tile. So it gets very humid and cold in the wintertime. Nobody, when I tell you nobody had central heating growing up. I mean, that's not a thing. What you would have in some cases is a tiny electric heater that you would have to sit right in front of to feel the heat. Or in some cases, a fireplace. But those are the two options. Or also an electric blanket. So, which is very concerning. But
I used to have one of those as a kid.
Right.
Yeah.
You would turn it on like 10 minutes before going to bed. My parents wouldn't let me use for more than 10 minutes because the electricity was so expensive. So I'd have to turn it off, and I would sleep with like 5 blankets. And then in the mornings, I remember at some point I went to this school that was in a different city. So I would have to wake up at 4:30 to go to school in the winter time. And it was just brutal. It's so cold inside of your home. And then like, I would just leave
when you wake up and you can see your breath.
Totally. You can, and the last thing you want to do is get out of bed.
Yes.
And I would put clothes on top of my pajama, like layers of clothes. But even the clothes there are not high quality. It's not like a very nice winter jacket here, that you buy and you put on top of a t-shirt and you're totally fine. No, just everything is not made for that weather. And so I was constantly cold in the winters and melting in the summer, because on the summer it was the opposite, right? We don't have AC. Maybe you would have a standing fan that's just blowing hot air on your face, and you can't open the windows, otherwise the mosquitoes come into the house. I mean, it was just a miserable vibe.
Now I understand why you're like, because you're not that into like deep nature, right?
I love nature. I'm just I like to appreciate nature. From
You just want to be comfortable.
I just want to be comfortable.
I've done
the uncomfortable
exactly.
thing.
You've paid your dues for many, many decades.
I spent my whole childhood being uncomfortable. And yes, now you understand why.
And now,
I like to be
I am getting it now.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it was just, I have this one memory that's for some reason, it's just something I remember. It was so hot. It was summertime. I don't know. It's like 100 degrees Fahrenheit, right? No air conditioning. And the only way to cool down in this building I lived in was I would fill up a bucket with water and sit inside of the shower, like in the shower, put my feet inside of the bucket and wet my hair and just sit there.
Wow.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Where that was the only way I could even feel comfortable. And then again, in the wintertime is a whole other misery. You're wearing jackets inside of the house.
Yeah. So your point is like, we take for granted now that we're in the like energy rich West.
Yes.
That, we're here in Austin and it's a gazillion degrees outside, but look at us, we're sitting here and it's comfortable. And this is just so standard and par for the course. We forget that actually still the majority of people on Earth don't have this luxury.
Exactly.
And they live in places with, Austin actually has a very extreme climate, I think, because it can actually get very cold here, but it's definitely extremely hot. And I don't understand how anyone could survive here without AC. I don't think you could.
And they did though, right?
Well, barely. I mean, it wasn't actually very inhabited. And I think one of the reasons Austin was because they would just stick around wherever there was water. There wasn't water around. Like I don't see how people could really live here. But so you're saying that like, we don't appreciate that it's easy for us to go, oh, the world should be using less energy. But actually everyone's out there just in the shit, constantly uncomfortable, sweating, which also makes it harder, by the way, to actually think and do high quality work. Like you're trying to lift yourself out of poverty and it's like, okay, but I'm like, I just need to go lie down. All right, like it's so cold, I'm about to lose a finger.
So exactly. It's not just about that. It's that it's one thing for you to read about these studies. Higher access to electricity leads to, better quality of life. It's another thing to live it and understand what it means. And so, to your point, there are several studies on how students' performances go up if there is air conditioning in their classroom in the summer. So it's not just about, oh, I'm slightly uncomfortable. It's really about improving your cognition. It's really about improving your level of comfort so that you can focus on other things. Because when you're just trying to stay cool enough or warm enough, you're wasting your brain energy on that. And I think that people in developed societies that have access to all of those things, and we can even talk about the difference between you having it in your home and you growing up in an energy-rich society. Because even things like hospitals, all the other infrastructure, commercial infrastructure that allows for a higher quality of life also requires a lot of energy. So even if you maybe didn't have access to air conditioning, that would make a huge difference in your life. But at least you grew up in an energy-rich society that enabled you and allowed you all these other things that you can't even think about.
Yeah, I mean, complexity, but generally speaking, we consider the more advanced our civilization is, the more complex it is. The more cool things, all the different industries, all the technologies, all the ideas, all the fun stuff that's happening. What drives that complexity? It's us taking low entropy energy and doing a bunch of stuff with it, creating a higher entropy, and then you get all this good stuff. So really it all boils down to energy.
Yes.
That is the lifeblood of everything. So why is it that there seems to be this weird zero-sum mindset, not only among the sort of wider population, but actually within the energy industry itself, when it comes to the topic of, because I often see like nuclear energy, well, some renewable energy advocates arguing with nuclear energy advocates, saying, oh, no, ours is better. You know, obviously you've got the fossil fuel industry who tend to argue against all forms of renewables, but although maybe they've gotten better, and maybe please illuminate us if that's the case. But like, why does there seem to be this sort of like warlike mentality within the different groups of people advocating for different forms of energy? Because surely just more energy is better.
That's probably just tribalism. People are just defending their tribe or what they perceive to be their tribe. But I think they're also trying to make an economic case, right? In the case of renewables, let's say they're trying to get subsidies for renewables only. So why is it that renewables are better than nuclear, let's just say? And the reality is there are so many different ways to paint that picture, because yes, renewables are better in certain regards, but they're worse in others, just because every single energy source has downsides and upsides.
In what way are they worse?
In terms of solar and wind specifically, they are intermittent. I mean, this is known. You know, the sun, people get mad. Renewables advocates get mad when people say this, the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow, but it's true. Yeah. Obviously at night, the sun is not shining. And then but even during the day, if you have a lot of clouds or sometimes even in fires. So in California, whenever there were wildfires, the smoke would block the sun from hitting solar panels. So solar panel electricity production also went down. So there are unexpected things like that bring, you know, the production down. We know that there are ways to solve for it, but that is a downside, right? It would be better if they were producing electricity all the time, or at least when humans need to use it. Because the way our grid is set up just means that people use electricity whenever they want, and you have to be able to provide it. By the way, I can't imagine that we're going to have a grid setup that looks different, because we're so accustomed to just using electricity whenever we do want. I think the question is more, how can you set up the existing grid with all these different new technologies in a way that ensures reliability?
Right, like batteries, because battery technology has come on leaps and bounds the last decade or so, right?
It's gotten a lot better, but it's still, you know, you won't, if you have several days of cloudy, of no sunshine or low wind output. And by the way, this is not rare. It happens all the time in Germany, in the UK. It just happened this year, where for days the wind really doesn't blow, and so you don't get all that.
It's actually going to get more common with climate change as well, because basically it's the differential between the poles and the equator. Because the poles are heating faster than the equator. There's less of a temperature differential across them, and it's that is making the jet stream become more wiggly.
Oh, wow.
And so as it becomes more wiggly, it means that these big pockets of sort of stagnant air, effectively, or more specifically, stagnant weather systems can occur, where it's why you'll actually get sometimes more crazy Arctic blasts that last for a while, because it's like the jet stream kind of kept the Arctic in the Arctic, and so they'll sort of bleed down. And similarly, you'll get these big pockets of high pressure, which tend to mean no wind and no rain or whatever. They'll get stuck in one place too. So if it almost may, as the problem gets worse, the climate becomes more extreme, you will get this more unpredictability. Like you build, oh, this is a windy area, we've built therefore a bunch of wind here, and it's like, well, shit, where's the wind gone?
Right.
We haven't had any wind for a month.
And that's probably why most people don't like wind. When you go into the clean energy sources, the one they dislike the most is wind, other than nuclear historically. And it's probably because if you drive by a wind farm, you can see all the turbines like this.
Yeah, they're often sitting there like,
right?
Do something.
Totally. And I think people see that and they think, why the hell do we have all these turbines if they're not producing electricity? Because with solar panels, you can't really know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I personally love wind farms. I get very excited when I see one. I think they're quite beautiful. But again, I get that they do have a downside. I don't know. To me, it just seems like we've talked about this before, but like the best energy grid is one that is both has multiple sources. So as you say, it's got backups. When one is not working as well, the other one can fill the gap, but also one that is very decentralized, which is where I think there's one of the arguments for solar, because like if there is some kind of attack or some kind of, solar flare or something that like screws up a portion of the grid, if people have solar on every single roof, like we're here in Austin right now, the AC is running because there's so much sun beating down. It's crazy to me that I don't have solar panels on my roof. I don't own my house, so I can't, otherwise I would, absorbing all that energy and using it to power the AC. Like that seems silly. And also then if the grid goes down, well, at least my house AC will stay on. It's like a really good backup plan for these emergencies, which are becoming more and more common. So why is it that America isn't like leaning into some more like decentralization of the grid?
There are several reasons for that. First of all let's back up a little bit. So you mentioned that the best grid would be very diverse. It's also going to look very different depending on the location. So Texas, cheap land, lots of sun, great spot for solar. Mm-hmm. Even for wind as well. Texas has a lot of wind potential. The UK, however, not very sunny.
Can confirm.
Right? Same with Germany, not very sunny. So in places like that, does it really make sense to go crazy on solar?
No.
Probably not. But that doesn't mean that Texas shouldn't. And the same thing is true for other sources of energy. And this was very clear and easily understood. It's so easy to understand with hydro. You look at the countries that have the highest share of hydro power in their electricity, and it's all because they have great hydropower potential. It's pretty straightforward, right? But somehow along the way, we've adopted this view that we should advocate for one energy source or another for all the places all the time.
Right.
When it doesn't really make sense.
No.
What's cool about nuclear is that it's pretty independent of geography. You do need like a river or a lake or a big body of water to cool down the reactors, but that's about it. And there's even in the United States, there is a nuclear power plant in the desert. And they built these giant pipes that bring basically like wastewater that's then used to cool the reactors down. So they're not bringing in fresh water for that. And the other really cool thing is that it doesn't need a lot of land. So if you're in a land constrained place like Japan, even though, the Japanese are slightly against nuclear because of Fukushima, obviously, but Japan is a great place for nuclear because they don't really have any other options. Mm-hmm. And, but going back to the point, it's all about different places and what is available to them. And I think we're moving more and more towards that. But for a long time, there was this idea that we needed to pursue 100% renewables. It was, just solar, wind, hydro, batteries, maybe a little bit of geothermal. But that was the goal. And people were just doing stupid stuff like Germany, turning against from nuclear and investing heavily in solar, which again, doesn't make sense for them.
Well, not by itself.
Not by itself. Well, but right. Even in general, sure, I just don't see how solar makes sense in Germany. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, if you look at the difference in like solar radiation between there and here.
Yes.
I mean, okay, the southern US is actually one of the most extreme places for sun, in terms of solar per square meter, but like, yeah, it's. I remember driving through where I grew up in Kent, which to be fair is the southern part of the UK, and they've been putting fields of solar panels, and I'm like, that's cute, but I don't really get sunburnt for a while in the UK, and I'm like a litmus test of like whether the sun is strong because I'm so pale I burn easy. It's like people don't appreciate just how far north Europe is. From, if you live in America, like London is the equivalent latitude of like Newfoundland.
Oh, wow.
Middle Canada.
Totally.
It's so far north. And it's just like, why are we doing this? But we do have a lot of wind. So is nuclear not considered a renewable source of energy?
It's not considered.
No. Why?
So renewable energy is something that can be replenished. So usually people consider renewable something like solar, wind, because those things can be replenished, right? It doesn't run out.
No.
However, under that same category, so is burning trees.
Oh.
Or poop, which, by the way, people use for electricity or like for energy. And so it's a little bit of a murky definition. Well, it's not a murky definition, but it's just that you can sneak in some stuff that's not as good for both the planet and human health. So in the case of wood burning, for example, it's very hard to get data on all the different countries, but I know that some countries in Europe, for example, Denmark, they'll say that their share of renewable energy is 40%. We don't know how much of that is wood burning. I have never been able to exactly pin down because a lot of it, they just present under the name of renewable energy.
Like they deliberately hide the information.
They deliberately hide the information. And that is a problem. Obviously, it can lead to deforestation. Also, burning wood does release
bunch of trapped carbon.
Exactly.
Right.
It does release a bunch of trapped carbon.
It's not carbon neutral, which is what they claim it is.
Well, here's the argument. Well, yes, it does release carbon, but then you plant another tree and it grows back, and so it's carbon neutral because it's absorbing some of the carbon. But how long does it take to grow a tree, and how do you know that you're actually replacing one for
of the
one?
Same mass, exactly.
Right, 1 for 1.
Well, and especially because this drove me crazy when I heard about it. There's this big power plant in the UK called Drax. Right. And they were like, oh, it's carbon neutral. It's doing biomass.
Right.
And
it's
then
called
it turns
biomass.
out they were literally deforesting. They were buying their wood from loggers who were deforesting old like OG forest growth in Canada, like these ancient forests that
They have a ton of carbon.
Well, so much, but also like importantly, like biodiversity and all these other values, which of course a carbon price does not like perfectly capture. And you cut that down and then you replace it with like a monocrop of like a single pine.
Right.
That is it's just ecosystem collapse in that area. And then they were like packaging this as saying this is renewable, good for the planet energy. It was like, this is probably worse than digging up a bunch of coal, honestly, because like, again, the value, I mean, it's really hard to quantify the value of biodiversity, but safe to say we are not sufficiently quantifying it.
Totally.
And so really screwed up.
And even from a air quality perspective, right? Burning wood is extremely bad for human health. It releases all this tiny particulate matter into the air. We inhale that, causes all sorts of lung issues, heart issues. We know that at least 4 million people die every year from air pollution related to fossil fuels, but even from burning wood as well. There are thousands of people that die every single year. I mean, it's harder to pinpoint exactly the numbers, but we do know that they cause also health issues. So I think the whole biomass thing, especially as it comes to burning wood from trees, to your point, causing deforestation of this ancient trees, I think that should be illegal. And it's just one of the issues that happens when you have a stupid label like renewable and you think that that's somehow better or good.
That's, again, it's like one of the biggest like jokes of our civilization is that every time you create some kind of incentive or metric that people are meant to optimize for, so you've created this label, renewable is good, therefore must do renewables.
Right.
And then people find a way to game it so that they can put their bullshit source of energy under that category. And then everyone just like goes and like pats them on the shoulder and optimizes for that.
Right.
Have you seen any, like, if you could wave a magic wand to improve the labeling system in the world's energy mix, like what would you do?
I've seen it. I've seen used carbon free or clean. To me, both.
But clean isn't the word clean. Like that could be gamed. It's very general. Like carbon free, I agree. That's like very precise, specific. Okay, we are not a net producer of carbon from using this, but like clean.
I believe carbon free is good. I think it might be a little too wonky or technical for the majority of people. Carbon free sounds, I don't know. So I've seen clean being used, and the definition of clean is low carbon. And so It's kind of the same thing.
Is it only low carbon? What about other like waste products?
It's mostly used for low carbon.
Okay.
Yes. So it's mostly used for low carbon. There might be some companies or people out there who use it for other things, but it's mostly used as the same. I think low carbon is fine. It's just a little technical.
I think one of the mistakes that people make is, not people, but like industries, is that they actually don't give the public enough credit. And so they use these like not whitewashy, but like these overly simplified terms. You know, it's like I always go on about COVID in every single episode I find a way, but I'm so traumatized by what happened in the world during that, like all the mistakes the world made around this virus. But like when they wouldn't tell people, well, actually, we don't trust the world to put masks on properly. So we're not going to do that. Or we're going to tell them, basically like lying to the public about the efficacy of different things, saying that vaccines are perfect. And actually, they will 100% stop everything. You just need to do this one thing. And like basically not giving the public credit to give them the actual nuanced detail. And so I don't know, it just seems like as a rule of thumb, industries in general need to like err away from it because or would you disagree?
I don't disagree, because I agree with you that the handling of the COVID pandemic was a disaster, especially as it came to communicating about the safety of masks and the vaccines later on. And we all saw that. However, I also understand that once you start getting into the nuances and the details, it's very, very hard to get people on board with something. And you can just look at politicians. Look at a politician like Trump, right? Who boils things down to the most basic level, and people can rally around those ideas and they get excited about it, even though it might not be 100% accurate, or he might be simplifying issues. I remember seeing this video once of somebody showing Hillary Clinton speaking to potential voters and Bernie Sanders speaking to potential voters. And she was going into all the details about the economy and how, and terminology and acronyms and all of this, to your point, giving the public the benefit of the doubt, like they will understand these things. And they pan out to the room and everybody was just like, what is this woman talking about? And not that people are not smart enough, but when you don't understand the acronyms and the nuances, you get lost. And that happens to me all the time. There are topics that I don't understand, obviously. And whenever people start talking about an acronym or something like that, I stop paying attention, basically. So yes, we should move towards more transparency, obviously. However, when you're trying to make the case for an incredibly complex technology that is hard to understand, I understand why people use some terminology that might seem a little vague. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. No, it does.
I don't think it's, how do I explain this? I don't think it's the best thing for longevity, because eventually people will catch on to how you simplified or you didn't explain the downsides enough. However, I understand why it's done.
Mm-hmm. So dialing back just sort of to the history of nuclear, because I'm on board very much that it's like it's almost like it's a magical technology that we unlocked some point in the 20th century. You could split the atom. There's so much energy that came through this process. It is carbon neutral, or basically, carbon zero. Its downsides are very small because the reactors these days are very safe. But for some reason, there's still this lingering perception that it is dangerous, it is bad, it is nasty. So talk us through the story of where this came from, because it seems unhelpful.
So you went back to splitting the atom, and you can't forget that we first split the atom, or we first split the atom. We can't forget that we first understood that we were splitting the atom in 1938 in Germany. So bad timing. Obviously, we were a year away from entering World War II, and immediately all the physicists around the world realized that this underlying science could be used to create weapons. And I think the majority of the world was very, very concerned that Hitler was going to be able to develop nuclear weapons. And I don't think any of us would like to even begin to imagine what the world...
Not the best person to...
Yeah, what would the world look like today if Hitler was the one who had developed nuclear weapons first?
Well, there probably would be none of our Jewish friends left. We'd all be wearing little swastikas.
Right? Not a great outcome. So thankfully Einstein co-wrote a letter addressed to President Roosevelt at the time, basically telling him, hey, we've figured out this technology. Pretty sure the Nazis are going to try to develop it. The United States should probably get ahead. So the US kickstarted the Manhattan Project, which only took a few years from when they started until they had a working bomb, which is crazy to think about. I don't think we can develop things that fast anymore in the world.
Maybe AGI. But that's been going for many, many years, so that doesn't count.
Yeah, that has been going for many, many years. And culminates with the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The world is introduced to nuclear technologies through bombing. And I think we can't understand the impact that had on human psyche of most people hearing for the first time about this technology.
Even hearing the word nuclear.
Nuclear and pairing it with images of mushroom clouds and children crying, running away from crumbling buildings. So that was the first sin. That was the first sin of nuclear. And I think it's really hard to understand the scar that left in a lot of people's minds. And then from the discovery of nuclear fission until 15 years after, only governments could build and operate nuclear reactors. So it was only for military purposes, for submarines, for weapons productions. But if you were somebody who wanted to make nuclear electricity for citizens, you couldn't do that. It was only military. So you go from associating nuclear to death, destruction, to associating nuclear with military, big government. And I want to set that stage for us because I think it's very important to understand how people came to hate it so much. But after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, President Eisenhower launched a campaign called Atoms for Peace. He delivered a speech at the UN General Assembly, making the case that we should promote the benefits of nuclear technologies. So for electricity production, for research, for agriculture, which is a whole thing that we can get into, but he wanted to make sure that we would promote the benefits of the technology while limiting the proliferation of weapons. And that's how the International Atomic Agency was started. It was kickstarted by that speech at the UN. And so the International Atomic Energy Agency, their entire goal is to promote the peaceful uses of nuclear while slowing down the proliferation. But even that at the time, a lot of people felt like it was a weird play by the US government to try and stop the rest of the world from acquiring nuclear weapons because they already had it. And so this was an easy way for them to prevent other countries from developing their own military program. I can't pretend to know what was going on in Eisenhower's mind, but I think that was an incredible initiative, and the IAEA has done amazing work since then in the non-proliferation space. And more recently, more also in the promoting the peaceful uses of nuclear. However, okay, let's go back. So then after that, there was this whole campaign, especially in the United States. It was kind of also tied with like the space race. So you have in the 50s, this crazy excitement about nuclear. And you can see this everywhere. a lot in the design. So even the Eames had a very famous pattern that was inspired by the atom. And you can see, even nowadays, when you search retrofuturistic, you're probably going to see a sign of an atom somewhere. So the renewed passion for nuclear was very tied to the space race. It was this view of the future, of a very science-forward future. Ford developed a nuclear-powered car, which fortunately, it was a terrible idea.
I think it's awesome. Wait,
no, it's probably bad. Like if you haven't, first of all,
did they actually build a prototype or?
Not a working prototype, but we can put up the image of the car.
How would you have? Because it's such a small thing to move.
Well, and also how do you cool it?
Right. How were they planning on doing it?
I don't think they were planning very much. That's why it never went
I see. It was literally just like someone wrote an idea on a blackboard.
It was a vibes thing.
Right.
It was great for the vibes. But even Walt Disney himself got entangled in this pro-nuclear era. So Walt Disney, it turns out, was a part of, a propaganda campaign to promote nuclear. But he made a whole film called Our Friend the Atom. And in it, Walt himself is explaining how nuclear works, how a chain reaction works, and how it's going to power this amazing future. And he was so obsessed with nuclear that he wanted Disney World to run on nuclear. So to this day, Disney World in Florida has a license to build and operate a nuclear reactor, which is very, very cool.
I think you should make that happen.
I would love to make that happen. I was doing the calculations the other day, and you need a micro reactor, basically. Like, you basically need 3 megawatts. So either 3 1 megawatt reactors or 1 5 megawatt with some excess.
So and what makes it a micro if it's under 1 megawatt?
If it's under 20 megawatts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
to actually talk us through the different, because I keep hearing about these like idea of small modular reactors. So I imagine most people are familiar with the idea of like most nuclear reactors on Earth right now are these big boys in the gigawatt sort of size, right? Which power like 1 million houses or sort of, like cities, countries, etc. But I keep hearing all about these small modular reactors. And everyone's like, this is the future, this is the future. So talk us through what's the difference and sort of what scales we're talking about.
I would love to talk about that. Can I just finish
Absolutely.
like the history? Because it's so interesting. And
okay, go on.
You asked the question like why people hate it so much, right? So you have all this excitement about nuclear, like, hey, nuclear cars and nuclear Disney World. However, in the 60s, you have this entire anti-establishment vibe that's starting to brew. So you have the women's liberation movement, the civil rights movement that are very tied to this anti-establishment feeling, right? It's all about anti-government, against the big man.
This is probably around the time of Vietnam War as well, right?
Anti-Vietnam War, exactly. It was a time when people felt very disillusioned by the government, and they felt like they were lied to, and in many cases they were lied to. And
also it was coming off the back of a bunch of like really poor environmental protections, right?
Really poor environmental protections.
There's that river on fire or something.
Yes, the Cuyahoga, I always mispronounce it, but the Cuyahoga River had caught on fire 12 times. And a river just spontaneously combusting because it was filled with shit and chemical dumps. And
right. This is the time. The point is, it's like water should not be on fire.
Catch on fire. Yes, it's what.
Well, you must be doing something seriously wrong to make a whole body of water catch fire.
Right. This was a time when companies were just dumping their waste.
Right. There was just no environmental regulation.
There was no environmental regulation whatsoever. So it was all of these things coming together, right? But I think the most important thing is the anti-establishment feeling, because nuclear was so hopelessly tied to the government in every country, but especially in the United States, which is what a lot of this environmental movement happened. And also the first actions by a lot of our most beloved, speak for yourself, but a lot of the biggest environmental organizations was anti-nuclear weapons. So Greenpeace, their first act was trying to stop a nuclear weapons test off the coast of Alaska. So they rented a little fishing boat called Greenpeace. And at that point, they were called the Don't Make a Wave Committee, based on the idea that these tests would create these massive waves. And so they went off the coast and tried to stop the test. They didn't succeed, but they did succeed in raising a bunch of awareness and getting people involved. And later on, Greenpeace expanded into other things like whaling and also being against nuclear electricity. But so a lot of these environmental organizations, they ended up arising as anti-nuclear weapons organizations, and then later on also being against nuclear electricity from a fear of radiation and waste and some of the other things that we've heard about. But all of these factors are what made the anti-nuclear movement so strong in the 1970s. And then, of course, if you have already all of these things making people feel like this technology is not safe, it's tied to weapons, then you have one accident and it's all it takes to confirm your feeling that this is a dangerous technology. When in reality, if you think about the fact that people can bring up 2 accidents that led to any fatalities in the history of commercial nuclear electricity, to me that speaks about how safe this technology is and not how unsafe it is. But
right, and of course it has the additional sort of thing working against it is that when there was an accident, it's a very like visualizable thing.
Yes.
Like this, there's like smoke or whatever, like toxic smoke billowing out of this huge factory, and the idea of it like melting down into the earth and so on. And meanwhile, if you actually look at the stats, I would love this Orwell in data chart. I'll make sure that it's put up by my face right now, that shows the number of deaths per unit of electricity that is produced by that thing. Nuclear is actually one of the safest. It's like absolutely tiny, whereas coal is killing people left, right, and center. But because it's just happening all the time, because we're so used to the idea of like a power plant with a big tall chimney and like black stuff coming out of it, we're like, oh, well, that's just standard. We've seen smoke before. Smoke isn't bad.
Right.
People are just okay with it. It's like this silent, invisible killer. It's like the idea of like plane crashes versus people are often more scared to fly than they are to drive,
right?
Even though it's orders of magnitude more dangerous.
Totally. And this is one of my favorite things ever. Favorite clip from the anti-nuclear movement. So we talked about accidents. In 1979, the United States had its worst accident, worst that didn't lead to any deaths or anybody getting sick, but it was the worst accident. It was at 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania. After that accident, which unfortunately happened 12 days after the premiere of The China Syndrome, which is a thriller about a nuclear power plant meltdown.
Bad timing.
Featuring Jane Fonda, who was iconic at the time already. So after this accident happened, a bunch of musicians got together and they decided to throw this big concert series called No Nukes in Madison Square Garden. So for several days, they were singing on stage and protesting and talking trash about all things nuclear, both weapons, but also electricity. And at one point, a band goes on stage and they sing this song that says, "Give me the comforting glow of a wood fire, but take all your atomic poison power away," which is hilarious because obviously we know now that burning wood is way worse for human health than nuclear. It's estimated that 40,000 people die in Europe from air pollution caused by burning wood directly, and more in the United States as well and around the world, obviously. But this is just one example of when people go with the vibes instead of the data. And to be fair to them, there was way less data back then. It was a newer technology, so people didn't have all the information. They didn't know how much the 3 Mile Island accident also, how much damage it would cause. But yeah, a lot of it was based on vibes. And to your point, nuclear, when there is an accident, it makes it into the news. And it's...
Going back to the bombs question, how different do you think things would have been had the counterfactual happened? That we had discovered nuclear energy first before any bombs were made.
When I started writing my book, I wanted to do this whole first chapter that was it was a fiction story about what the world would look like had we developed electricity before weapons, had the world been introduced to electricity first. And obviously I went down all these super cool, high-tech, sci-fi worlds, right? Would we be...
You tried to tell the story of the meme, the classic
literally
one,
society
if men go to therapy or whatever.
Society if men went to therapy and nuclear electricity was developed first. Yeah, so the flying car, the whole thing, the whole shebang, less air pollution. But that's one of the interesting things about writing a book is that hopefully you get more evidence and you develop a more sophisticated worldview. And in the beginning, I thought, wow, the world would have been so much better if we were introduced to electricity because we would have developed clean energy much sooner. All countries on Earth could have had 100% clean electricity by now, and we would have energy abundance and all those things. But then I realized, what if we had spread nuclear technologies all around the world without the understanding of the bad side of it? Without the understanding of what the impact of developing nuclear weapons would be? And what if it was just easier to develop nuclear weapons because we didn't develop the safeguards in the first place that would prevent the proliferation? And I think about that as it relates to AI, because we are doing that with AI. We are developing first the positive side, the helpful chatbot, the friendly assistant, the person who just says yes sir to everything you say. But that is arguably, nice. However, that also means we don't know how bad the bad is. And I think in the case of nuclear, yes, it sucked that the weapons were developed first, but at least gave us the motivation to form international cooperation and to develop safeguards to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. Sure, it delayed the transition to clean energy. I'm hoping that we're wise enough to now pick it back up and be able to develop in an even safer and better way. And we were able to prevent the proliferation of weapons. So, not to be a bummer, but I am glad this is how things played out, especially now that I can compare with AI, because we don't know what the Hiroshima and Nagasaki of AI are. There are lots of speculations. We haven't seen it, at least that we're aware of yet. And so there's not an incentive to create very strong international cooperation.
No. Yeah, no, I actually very much agree with you. I also, though, worry, because people keep saying, what will be the Chernobyl or, Hiroshima of AI? And once we get that, then it's fine. All the sane regulations are actually going to come about. And I'm like, okay, sure. Well, first of all, that Hiroshima, it might be a lot bigger than Hiroshima, first of all, because AI is already becoming so embedded in all of our systems. And there's many different flavors of AI. And there's also, it's like choose your type of catastrophe as well, because it's like, is it like a bad actor using it for a bad thing, or is it like loss of control, blah, blah, blah. But what worries me even more is that because it's become so hard to make sense of anything in the world now, in part mediated by AI, because it's like we're going to be awash in like fake videos where it's just you can't discern truth from fiction. And there's so much propaganda already. Like the internet is now just a sea of propaganda of every different, political conflict, etc., and all the culture wars. Totally, yes. Everything is culture wars, including AI.
It's already happening to the point where you look at a conflict
and you just can't tell.
And you can't
true.
tell.
No.
Exactly.
And so some kind of AI-mediated disaster could happen. And there's so much culture war noise already. Would we be even able to tell? The the grid went down in Spain. We still don't really know what caused it. Now, could that have been a cyber attack? Yes, it could be. Could it have been like, someone using AI to do that? Who knows? Like that, we might be having all these red flags go off because a lot of stuff is going wrong and we can't really tell. So that's what concerns me with AI, and that we don't have, it's not as convenient as something like, well, boom, there goes a bomb, or, oh shit, those bad guys got hold of a bunch of enriched uranium. It's trickier. It's much, much trickier.
I would say the Hiroshima of AI would be literal robots in the street murdering people. That's the most obvious one.
Right.
Like, okay, yeah.
Seems bad. Yeah.
Pretty bad.
Did you see the video of the robot spazzing out on the guy was in there and it just starts like it was funny.
Was an Optimus? No,
it wasn't. I don't think it was an Optimus. No, it was some, I don't know, it was in some lab somewhere and it was like hanging up on a thing. And it like some program got loaded into it which made it do it, and the guy's like shouting like, oh, why did it? There's actually been a second video of it. I'll put them both up because they're quite entertaining.
It's giving Westworld.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing. I think that people, I think Terminator 2 is probably one of the best movies ever made. Not because of its like messaging, but just because of like it's just a masterpiece in general. But in that, like it's like this idea of like it's got this red eyes and it is evil. It has evil intents to kill humans. But like, whereas the one freaking out on its thing that could have actually killed someone because it's like a powerful machine doing this, and someone just standing by, if it gets them in the right way, like human skulls are not very strong. It seems like it's more like an accident where it's not like heat seeking people out to kill them, but it's just going haywire. That seems more plausible, but it's also funnier. It's right. It's like, and so we just laugh at this stuff. I'm like, no, that could have actually killed someone in the wrong place, or like if there was a child walking by it, like for sure.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So what advice would you give the AI industry, like as someone who's studied what went right, what went wrong in terms of like, for them to be more responsible, like in the way, like the IAEA did, you hold them up as an example of like responsible international cooperation that found a way to reap as much of the benefits from nuclear and minimize the downsides, the harms, and so on. Like what lessons should be drawn from that by the AI industry?
So I'll just walk you through the steps of how it works for nuclear at the IAEA. So let's say I'm a country and I don't have nuclear electricity, I don't have nuclear research, I don't have any nuclear programs in my country. And I want to develop a nuclear electricity program because I want clean electricity. So I go with I go and start a conversation with the IAEA. And I basically have to sign a piece of paper that says, I will develop a nuclear electricity program and I will not pursue bombs. And in exchange for that paper, the IAEA will assist me because it's not easy to start a nuclear electricity program. You can't just go on eBay and order a reactor. And there's a series of things. You need to have a regulatory body. You need to have all these things in place in order to have that program. So it's a lot easier if you go to an international organization like the IAEA for help. So you sign the piece of paper, you say that the IAEA then helps you develop your program. And also in exchange, you give them access to your facilities. So they send inspectors every year to go inspect your facilities. I think they have some they have some people that stay there longer, depending on your program. They write reports about it to make sure you're complying. And that's pretty much it. So 31 countries in the world have nuclear electricity. And out of those 31, only 7 of them have weapons. Out of those 7, 5 of them begin with weapons and then developed electricity later. All of that to say, it works. That you can point to a couple of examples where they started with a nuclear electricity program and later developed weapons, I think shows that how successful it has been, not the opposite. Because in reality, most countries just want cheaper electricity. Having a nuclear weapons program is kind of a headache. Now, there are countries that really want nuclear weapons, right? And they'll do it without a nuclear electricity program. That's literally what Israel and North Korea did. Both. They both have illegal nuclear weapon. They both have illegal nuclear programs. In the case of nuclear, though, the biggest proliferation concern is in the enrichment portion and then also in the reprocessing waste portion. Those are the big areas to be concerned. The fuel that goes in your reactor to make electricity, that's not really the part people are concerned with. Now, not a lot of countries have the ability to enrich uranium because that's another thing. So you can have a nuclear electricity program. That doesn't mean you get an enrichment program. Some countries do, some don't. Again,
you need like fancy centrifuges, right?
You need to have very fancy centrifuges, lots of them. And it costs obviously a lot of money. And most countries, again, they don't want to put all that money into enrichment because they would rather just buy cheap fuel from Russia or some other country that sells it to them. And then in the reprocessing as well, this is not a walk in the park. You know, reprocessing nuclear waste is not an easy thing. So for you to set up that entire program without any help, because the IAEA is not going to help you, it's a nightmare. However, if you have a lot of money and you really want to do it, you're probably going to do it illegally.
Right.
Which goes back to the point that you don't need to fake a nuclear electricity program to get your weapons, if that's your goal. As a matter of fact, I would argue that having a nuclear electricity program actually makes it harder because you have all the IAEA inspectors constantly up in your business asking questions and going to your nuclear facilities and gathering information, right? The whole Iran situation really just unfolded because of a report that the IAEA wrote on how they were enriching uranium.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wait, walk me through what happened. So the IAEA went and did their inspection and were like, seems like you're being a little bomby, or what?
Basically. That's basically. Well, first of all, Iran has had a nuclear program since the 50s.
Right.
So it's not, the IAEA has been working with them for decades. They started with a nuclear electricity program. Then they started pursuing some military stuff, always unsure, right? And then the Obama administration made a deal with Iran where it relieved some of the sanctions in exchange for an agreement that they wouldn't enrich uranium to a certain percentage. And people had problems with it because it would expire after a certain date and blah, 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 but it was working. And the Trump administration walked out of the deal. And so Iran started enriching uranium to higher levels again. So in May of 2025, the IAEA puts out this report saying that for decades, Iran had been playing with some undisclosed nuclear material at 3 different nuclear locations in the country that were also undisclosed. And they also said in a different report that they had enriched uranium up to 60%, which is way higher than you would need for electricity production alone, and even for research. And they had increased the quantity of uranium enriched up to 60%. So those are the reports that led to the actions that we saw later taken by the United States.
Ooh.
Is that perfect? No. But again, the IAEA does, having people on the ground, having boots on the ground, gathering information, I think does give some visibility on what's happening. I think that faking a nuclear electricity program, going through the IAEA, having IAEA inspectors on the ground inspecting your nuclear facilities, even if you have clandestine facilities, which was the case with Iran, the IAEA eventually caught on and wrote a whole report about it and led the United States to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer to have some kind of international authority overlooking these things, because it's just, you have a bunch of actors, most of whom are good, but some might be bad, and incentives for them to do bad things, and having the ability to just like mutually, surveil one another essentially makes people stay in line.
Right. So,
how is the IAEA funded? What are their incentives?
The IAEA is funded by a bunch of different governments. So
it's like a shared
obviously,
pool.
Yeah, it's a shared pool. It's very much like the UN.
Mm-hmm.
It is a part of the UN. Mm-hmm. So it's funded by different governments.
There's actually a functioning, useful version of it. Because I don't know, I've been very red-pilled against the UN lately, just seeing the way they
I'm sure there are downsides, and I'm sure there are ways it could be run better, but I think it's very impressive.
Yeah.
I think it's very impressive that, again, we have so many countries with nuclear electricity. We haven't really seen a huge proliferation and spread of nuclear weapons. And also this report in Iran, I mean, those are undisclosed facilities, right? And sure, it took them a while. They didn't immediately catch on, but eventually they did. Now, back to your question, how does that relate to AI? Or what's the advice? From my understanding, it's a lot different, obviously. It's a lot easier to buy equipment for data centers. It's a lot easier to set up a data center to build an AI. So I don't know exactly how that translates, but from the few conversations that we've had with a couple of different people, there is something you can do, like you can track chips, because obviously there are few companies in the world that...
Right, it's basically just NVIDIA. TSMC.
Basically NVIDIA making the chips. Is there a way to track those chips to make sure they're going to, countries or companies that
you
have...
just want to know where they are. As a global consciousness, you want to know where these different things are.
But let's say you do have an IAEA equivalent to AI. It could be an AIEA.
Oh God.
Oh my God, just to get everybody so confused. The AIEA. Honestly, not a bad idea.
Yeah.
But let's say you do have something like that. Okay, I'm a company that's trying to develop this super powerful AI. Or let's just say you were a company that want to build AI and you're saying you want to build narrow AI to solve protein folding. Is there a way to ensure that your AI is going to be used for that? I don't know the answer to that, but is there a case to be made that to develop AGI, you need such an immense amount of compute that you could have an idea of which companies are trying to pursue that, just sheerly based on the number of chips that they're buying for the data center? Do you have any visibility on that?
I mean, fortunately, yes, because as you say, it's like mostly NVIDIA chips, some TSMC chips. It is relatively trackable. You need a large data center, which is usually visible from space in some way. So yeah, all the while it's just like two core companies creating essentially the substrate on which these things run, means that you can actually then keep roughly track on it, and it requires an immense amount of capital to do. That's the other thing as well, right? There's also limited brain power in terms of researchers who can actually move the frontier forward. So there's a number of like scarce resources which are also relatively trackable, which I think is in our favor as a species, to be able to like self-manage this. But at the same time, what's sort of lacking is it's just like, it's become almost anathema, the idea of like, I get it as well. Like, it's like, who watches the watchers? That's why I was asking, like, who funds the IAEA? What are their incentives? How are the ways for that to become corrupted? Because all these things are corruptible. And I think it's testament that you say that the IAEA has not been corrupted, has maintained, like, it's just doing its job well. That's a very positive sign. And it surprises me I don't know if actually that many people are against the idea of some international governing body of AI, but I imagine a lot of Silicon Valley are, because they just don't want to be governed.
By the way, there are people...
I get it. Like,
right. There are people who say that the IAEA was corrupted.
Oh, really?
And that their report on Iran was purely incentivized by US and Israel interests. Right? And so there are people who think that.
Right. I mean, it could be true.
Could be true, exactly.
But at the same time, I could totally believe that Iran would say that, or anyone who wants it. It's propaganda in both directions. It's like,
and I can totally believe that Iran was also doing sketchy stuff.
Right. They've done plenty of it. There's plenty of evidence.
So I don't have an evidence to say that they've been corrupted, but I'm sure there are people who do believe that.
Yeah.
But the question is, okay, so let's say you set up the
AI version. Yeah.
Let's say you set up the AI version of the IAEA, and you can track the chips and you can track those things. Yeah, you could have governments that are funding it, right? But to your point, a lot of people feel an almost allergic reaction. And it's funny because a lot of my followers are very EAC, like just accelerate. And they are confused by my stance because they think, well, you saw what regulations did to nuclear. You saw what the anti-nuclear movement did to nuclear electricity. And yes, but again, I am glad that we have safeguards in place. I'm glad that we don't have every single country on Earth with nuclear weapons. I think that's a good thing.
Say why it's a good thing, because I think a lot of people don't intuitively grok why that's a good thing, surprisingly.
Okay, so it's funny to even have to explain that, but let's just say every country on Earth has nuclear weapons. What happens if some crazy president of some random country launches a nuclear weapon and it leads to nuclear war between several different nations? I mean, you just increase the chances of nuclear war happening because you increase the chances that a crazy president is going to launch a nuclear weapons attack.
The more poles there are, essentially, the more likely, the more boundaries there are between different clusters of nuclear weapons, the more likely it is that there's some kind of exchange happens. Right.
Yeah. That's a very intellectual way of saying the more weapons, the more... Yeah. The more weapons, but not just the more weapons, the more individual identities that have a weapon. Like if every single person on Earth, to the most extreme example, had a weapon, there's probably going to be a bunch going off just on the street down the road at some point in the next week, just because there are crazy people.
Yeah, crazy people get into fights, people get into gunfights, like it'll happen with that kind of frequency.
Right.
So the more actors have a potentially very, very dangerous thing, the more likely some kind of conflict will happen, and to the point that it'll effectively become inevitable.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I understand a little bit of the reaction against, we don't want the governments telling what to do, and there is always but China, to borrow from our friend Tim Urban, but China. There is always the idea that if we don't develop it, China is going to develop it, which, to be fair, in the case of nuclear electricity, is literally what happened. China is now building big nuclear, in 4 or 5 years, and at costs that are comparable to methane gas in the United States.
Wow.
So they have dominated the nuclear electricity market, period. And the second one is Russia. So it's a valid point. And unfortunately, I wish I had more answers. I do believe we should at least have a conversation about what safeguards look like and have a plan. I don't know. I cannot talk about this. I'm really depressed because I see the necessity for it and I just don't see incentive for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds, I think it's going to happen anyway.
AGI.
No. The thing that usually creates an incentive for there to be some kind of safeguards, or for there to at least be more transparency and an ability for different people to check in on others, for the different actors to almost like self-surveil,
right?
Which, like this idea of surveillance, where it's like surveillance from beneath as opposed to, because I agree, surveillance from on the top implies like one world government, and now you're just opening up like 1984 or Brave New World, you pick your dystopia, but those type of nightmare scenarios, which we don't want. But at the same time, we need an ability to be able to like check on one another that someone's not doing something really, really sketch, just like taking a dark gamble for the whole world, just for a little win for themselves. And Alison Duttman, a previous guest on here, she talked about this idea of surveillance. So instead of surveillance, it's from beneath, where it's like, and you can do this sort of cryptographically, basically. It's like using zero knowledge proof protocols. You can't, it's not like everyone has a camera on everyone at all times. It's like there is a way, there are like some methods of keeping track of what's happening, but only when certain like alarm switches are tripped, a tripwire goes off in some sense, whatever you design that to be, does the system actually become transparent and everyone can be like, wait, what's going on? And everyone has a look. So the information is being recorded. And again, maybe is that by like actual people going to the different sites, checking it out, or some other like more advanced method. But the information is there, but no one actor can just like take control of it all. It needs like a certain number to have been opted in for the sort of alarm system to go off and people to then be able to go and check on one another. There's something directionally in that. It's beyond my pay grade to know exactly how to design it, but that's the kind of, it's decentralized and therefore not hijackable by like some crazed lunatic. But it provides the ability for civilization to actually keep an eye on what's going on.
You would still need these different companies or governments to sign up for that. Right.
Oh, yes. And so this gets to my point. So, and the way to incentivize that to happen is from the public. There has to be enough public concern to be like, hey, fuckheads, we're watching you. Like, you can't just keep doing this stuff unilaterally and like, again, gamble with all of our futures just because you're the ones making, your shareholder number goes up for you. And that will require, funnily enough, some kind of essentially, people's movement of like, no, we want more transparency on AI. We want to have more of a say on the technologies that are just being like force-fed to society. We want to know what's being built. Now, it's not to say that like, because I agree, like you don't want like populism to like dictate everything, because I agree that Joe Schmo does not understand AI enough, not as well as a CEO of an AI company. I think the AI CEO should have more say because they obviously just have more expertise, but it shouldn't be, they have 100%. And I think it's inevitable because people are like, you're just seeing the AI backlash welling up. And anyone who's saying that it's like, oh, it's fine, the people are just being silly, they have no idea what's coming. Like you see these, and I don't want it to be like these kind of like horrible Luigi Mangione type sort of backlashes, but that's going to become more common as more and more people feel disenfranchised by AI. So many people are losing their jobs faster than new jobs are being created. And you're just going to have this critical mass of like general backlash. And, if I was a tech CEO, I would be getting ahead of that by like asking like, hey, come and examine me. I think we should be examined more. Be the good guy, take the lead on this. Be more democratic effectively. Because this backlash, I think it's coming, and that we don't want it to be, we don't want the same thing that happened with nuclear energy, where the backlash was so strong and so stupid that then you don't get any of the upsides and everything gets shut down. So yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a chicken and egg, but it's generally speaking, more transparency is better. And I don't know, it feels like people who are like trying to fight against that because they think, oh, well, transparency will lead us to being regulated. It's like, well, what are you even fighting for here?
And that's the point I was going to make. So much of the argument that I and others make for an abundant future is about human lives. We just want people to have better lives, be it have an air conditioning at home so they are not melting in the summer or freezing in the winter. If all of this is in service of human lives, what good is it to create a technology that will make lives worse for everybody? And people will come and say, well, we're going to have so much abundance and ta-da-da-da. And like, sure, you can increase energy consumption in the United States by a little bit, and that will improve some people's lives. But the vast majority of Americans have somewhat comfortable lives. So are you going to 10x the number of goods that people can buy? And how is that offset against the fact that nobody's going to have jobs or meaning whatsoever in their lives?
Jobs and meaning are related but not identical, right?
Yes. I think they're more tightly correlated than we would like to believe. especially in a place like the United States. When I moved here, I was shocked that every time I met somebody new, the first question was, what do you do? I didn't experience that in Brazil. I don't know. People ask about other things. But here it's very much your identity is tied to your job. And obviously people have hobbies and da-da-da-da. But what we've witnessed in the past decade or so, as more people had free time, or as more people had more free time, and as their quote-unquote quality of life went up, we used a lot of that free time to fight online and to create all sorts of stupid culture wars. Remove jobs from that equation and let people just live wall-y lives of consumption where they're glued to their video game or
VR or
TV, VR all day long. I fail to see how that's not going to create a massive crisis of meaning and potentially the extinction of the human species. Because if you have people all day long in VRs talking to their AI companions, it's already happening, by the way. Young people are not getting into relationships. Because, I mean, this is what I observe, right, from people online talking about relationships. The smallest little thing is a huge red flag. And this person disagrees with you, they're toxic. And they're a narcissist. So there's already this huge push towards any inconvenience that somebody presents means they're not the right person for me. Right. It means they're toxic, gaslighting.
Better to be single.
Yeah. I mean, how many women have you heard saying that?
So often. Well, men too.
Yeah. Both.
But mostly women. Right.
Especially women.
No, totally. And it's a good relationship is hard work. The person is never perfect. Like Igor and I have as probably good a relationship as anyone I know. We still fight all the time. There's many things about him that drive me crazy and vice versa. But that's part of it. And it's just like, but if I've been force fed the idea that no, they have to be perfect and do all the things that you like. And it's like, well, that's, you're just never going to be satisfied.
You're never satisfied. You break up a relationship, go to the next one, and then you're not satisfied again. And then you end up single because better to be single than with a toxic narcissist.
Mm-hmm. And then especially then when you couple that with the wave of AI, like relationship bots, whatever you want to call them.
Right.
Sex bots, companions is a fluffy word for it. But like ultimately the thing that gives you emotion, some form of like emotion, like emotional stroking of your head through words. And they're going to get better and better and better at being exactly personalized to what makes our egos feel like we're seen. Like the resistance is just like going to become so insurmountable for like person to actually get into enough of a relationship where they actually get married and have kids.
Oh, forget about it. Yes.
Yeah. And it surprises me that more people don't see that.
Right. It seems fairly obvious at this point, especially getting to the point of having kids, because also we live in this world of crazy consumption, not only of material goods, but of trips and experiences. It's one of the reasons why also people don't want to have kids earlier, is because they don't want to give up their lives.
Right. The opportunity cost.
They don't want to downgrade. They'll say, oh, I get to travel every week and, go to all these fancy restaurants, and having a child is expensive. And I don't blame them. That's the society we're living in. But when you pair all of these things, the fact that people are already struggling to have real relationships, and that they don't want to have kids because they don't want to stop having all these experiences and they don't have enough money for it. How is it that taking away their jobs and the only thing maybe that's giving them meaning, and then just slapping them in front of a VR or a video game or any, whatever that is keeping them entertained all day long, how is that better for humanity?
Right. I mean, I'm literally rereading Brave New World now, and it is becoming increasingly that sort of, it's this like everything is built around consumption and removal of emotional any kind of emotional annoyance.
Yes.
It's like you instant gratification. It's just like instant gratification on steroids. And yeah, I mean, some people though truly think, I mean, this is the win-win podcast, right? It's like, what is the win-win here? Like, this is a like thing I wrestle with always. It's like, well, but if, this idea of wireheading, if you could plug into a machine, which you will never feel a negative emotion, isn't that radical abundance? And I would argue, no, it's not, because true radical abundance means you also have the abundance of actual, like, you need like negative emotions that push you to strive and achieve something. Because if you, like, basically you're going to zero achievement if you're just in this thing of, it might feel like you're being achieved. Well, maybe, but then again, maybe if you're feeling it, then it's real.
Right.
So it really does touch on this like fundamental question. Like, some people truly believe that is actually the optimal. We should just go to that, and it's just about maximizing hedons, or eutalon, like moments of pleasure.
There's probably a lot of clinical evidence, though, that hedonism is not good long term for happiness, and that Jordan Peterson talks a lot about this. How the only way to have a meaningful and good life that makes you feel proud is to make the biggest sacrifice that you can, to carry the biggest burden that you can, meaning do the hardest thing that you can at any given moment. And that's like on the opposite end, right, of the spectrum of how you see the world. The truth is probably somewhere in between.
Yeah.
But this gets into a very religious conversation about what's the meaning of life. Literally, what is the meaning of human existence? What is it? Is it to just be happy in front of a computer consuming? Maybe. We don't know the answer to that, right? That's what's so crazy. And my personal opinion is that it's not, because every time I do that, I hate myself.
Right.
If I spend a whole day in front of the TV just eating and watching content, I feel horrible. But maybe that's just because I grew up in a society that...
No, but I feel it too. We grew up in quite different societies.
Right.
At the same time, we're quite similar people in some ways. Maybe some people do truly just like that is... I mean, that's the concept of like retirement, actually, if you think about it. Someone like works all their life. It used to be the American dream, right? Work all your life to raise enough money to have a family and so on. And then you get to a certain age and it is time to retire, where you become officially a person of leisure, where you just consume. So in some ways it's a goal, but the thing that makes the goal meaningful is that you went through the arc of doing the dream, doing the strife, working so that you can get to this, like, this reward. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have the sort of mountain to climb to get to the reward, then does the reward actually mean anything?
Right.
I mean, I always sort of say when someone asks me the meaning of life, it's like the meaning of life is to discover the meaning of life. But again, what is that? So it's a process. It's not an outcome. It's a process. That the meaning is in the process and the doing.
Right. It really is.
Yeah.
And it's in and you see that very clearly when you have kids. The little things, the figuring out the feeding schedule, and they went to the bathroom every day this week. It's all these little things that you're constantly tweaking and trying to figure out. Those are the things that bring you satisfaction and reward in figuring out how to make them better, healthier, and all of the things. It's the same in your life, right? When you begin a project, you have no idea if it's going to work out, and then you make a series of moves, and some of them work and some of them don't work. But then the ones that do work, you celebrate even more because of the failures before. I mean, everything in life is like that. But yeah, maybe it doesn't matter because you're plugged into a computer, or you have a neural net in your brain that is just canceling out any of the negative feelings you might have associated with not having built something. And maybe we're just like old people. Maybe we're just the degrowthers. old people being like, stop messing with humans.
I mean, I think if you get to a point where you are truly, you can manipulate emotions, brain chemistry, etc., so much that you don't ever have negative emotions, you are truly a new species.
Right.
That is no longer a human. So that would be the death of humanity. Yes. It's a death. It's the birth of something new. The question is that new thing better? Maybe we can't conceptualize of it because of our human brains that we need the sort of the differential to have meaning. That said, look at all religious texts. And I do think there's a lot of wisdom in almost all of the religious texts in different ways. They all relate to this idea of like, why did God create evil? So that actually something happens. If we're just in this, like, to me, it's like the kind of like this like thing where everything is instant gratification and so on, is it effectively like a heat death?
Yes. Definitely that. If there is no way to chemically or physically alter our brains so that we don't experience negative emotions, then we're a new species, to your point. But if we're just not experiencing bad emotions because everything is catered for us, well, I don't know. That didn't make any sense, actually. Now that I think about it.
It kind of did.
I don't know that it did. But okay, this is a different way to put it. If we can chemically or physically alter our brains in a way that makes us not experience any negative emotion, to your point, we're a different species then. But if we don't experience negative emotions because there is no friction in our lives, because everything is just there, the food is there, the entertainment is there, everything is just available at all times, then I think we're still grappling with the same human issues of needing to strive for something, needing to build something. And we're still going to have to deal with the depression that comes with that.
I mean, when you hear like yogis and such talking about nirvana or maybe it's not yogis, but you know what I mean? Those type of people. those people, oh God, the spiritually advanced, whatever you want to call them, people who dedicate their entire lives to spirituality, the sort of, you want to get to this state of nirvana, etc., where you don't have, right? You don't actually have these negative emotions. That is a sort of, again, that would be that kind of state. You've eradicated that, but again, isn't the value in the getting there in the first place?
Right.
But once you sort of almost break through, then you no longer care about the journey, because you're in this state. It's basically almost like a timelessness.
That's interesting then, because it makes me think there's nothing I want to be less than a very spiritually advanced person who's just like, I'm okay with everything. And imagine what would the world look like if everybody was in that state constantly? Would we have innovations and...
Well, you wouldn't need them, presumably.
Right.
People would just like live. I mean, I don't know. Assuming people still do, like, do we need to still do basic bodily functions like eat and such?
Right.
Maybe not. Maybe that is the goal.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know.
By the way, like, I love that we're exploring this conversation. Yeah. We're getting to the point where maybe that is the goal, because that is the only goal, because otherwise there is no society.
But once you get there, I feel like at some point, I mean, again, someone joked about, I can't remember where I read this, but it's like, why did God create the universe? He created it because he was bored, because he'd done everything. And he was like in this state of perfect bliss. And he's like, okay, that's cool, but like, I want something new now. So let's start this sim going.
Yes.
And there's actually a bunch of strife and there's really bad things that happen. And it's like, let's see how people overcome it.
He's like,
right.
She or he or
they
them.
They, them. Yeah. It, that. Whatever. It's pronouns maybe. It's so maybe it is the goal. Maybe we should be striving for it, but it will kickstart the cycle again. I don't know.
It also just makes me think, you and I both know people who are just hardwired for working on very complex problems. And I would think myself not as extreme, but I do like figuring out hard problems. That's, why I set out to do this crazy nuclear electricity thing. But there are people who are much more extreme than me. And then what do those people do in a society like that? Do they also just practice to become enlightened?
Maybe. I think a lot of them go into video game design, design their own games, which, by the way, is if we did live in a post-scarcity society, I'd be just going all in on games. I'd be like, all right, I kind of did that for a chunk of my life, but that's because, again, it's like, some people are just so hardwired to need to have some kind of scarcity to compete for.
Right.
Which is fine. But that's why I think games are so good, because it's for the people who have perhaps too much of that. It's a way for them to channel that energy.
Right. And then what happens to the human body at that point? Because you don't even need... Like, let's just say you're just going to live in your VR and you have machines that are stimulating your muscles enough so they don't atrophy, and you have a machine that's feeding you food.
Yeah.
That's kind of that's like the extreme version of that, right?
Yeah, like I think a lot of people who just hate their bodies or, don't like doing physical things naturally gravitate to that. That seems like they're like our friend, I won't say her name, but who lives down the road, she would love that.
Right.
Right? She's just like, yeah, I'd be done with this. If I could be done with this silly body, that would be fantastic. There are some people who truly live that way. So I guess in a win-win future, for those who want that, they should have the freedom to do that. Mm-hmm. Similarly, for those who don't want that, I would consider myself, I like having a body. I like climbing mountains. I like the feeling of pushing it to the limit. I should have the freedom to do that too. So really what it comes down to actually in this win-win future world would be of like radical abundance, is that you can choose to live the kind of life you want. And tying this back to AI and this idea of like this sort of Wall-E world where everything is provided on tap, everyone's just fat, like wire-headed, etc. What I don't like about that is that it's like it will become the default state of the world because people have forgotten what it's like to have the striving to actually go out and do the thing, because it's just the incentives are so strong that everything becomes that way. It's just the consumption machine is so good at convincing you to consume that you lose your agency to remember what it was like to not do that.
Definitely that will be the default.
Exactly. And that's where I think my fear of this stuff is like when I notice my own social media addiction, I don't like it because I feel like my agency's been taken away, because it's like mega powerful super algorithm is so good at getting me wound up that I end up just scrolling for hours and I'm like, come up for air, like what the hell?
It also just takes you away from all the things that makes you, at least for me, from all the things that make me enjoy life, which is exercising, communicating with friends, spending time with my child, learning a new hobby. All of those things are things that bring me pleasure. And I feel that with social media, I spend hours a day just engaging with people that I don't even know. They might be bots for all I know. And getting angry over stupid stuff, like the CEO of Astronomer cheating on his wife at the Coldplay concert.
You weren't angry, you like
the
memes.
That was pretty
just
funny.
Enjoyed it.
No. But, those are not the things that make me personally happy. But yeah, to your point, maybe there is a huge subset of people that would be happy with that. And they should have that possibility. So probably the end is going to be a bunch of Wall-E type people and then a bunch of hardcore homesteaders that are just doing everything the old way, growing their own food and doing their own things with hopefully a lot of tech that can help them.
Techno Pastoralism.
Yes, Techno Pastoralism. Finally, we got to the topic of Techno Pastoralism. I would love to grow my own food, but have little robots that tell me the quality of the soil and that can detect if there is some pest and find out solutions for that pest as well so I can grow my vegetables. Helps me with educating my children, but I'm still the one helping, doing the work. I would love to live in a home like that, like a very pastoral landscape, but that is enabled by a bunch of really cool advanced technology. But maybe that's just a smaller subset of people.
Yeah. But I agree. It's a great aesthetic. Like I could see myself leaning into that because I love technology, but I'm also a farm girl.
Right.
I love animals. I love dirt.
Right.
I love open air and mountains. But I really I don't want to do, I've spent many years cleaning out stables and like wallowing in mud. And like, there's sometimes I want to do that, but I don't want to do it day in, day out to have like the animals and such around me. So you just like,
right.
Again, it's like choose your adventure.
Choose your adventure.
Your strife. Yes.
Choose your strife.
But
to be fair, I think nobody's going to say no to that. Right? I imagine.
No one would do, but the current incentives are not taking us there. That's the thing. At least some of the incentives. Like, I think the incentives on the internet has just become, it's just all about engagement and attention.
Right.
We're being attention farmed. We are the factory farmed animals in service of these big social media platforms trying to keep us on there as long as possible. So that is taking us away from techno pastoralism.
Right.
Or whatever person's, thing of
Techno
choice.
pastoralism is great. Sign me up for that. You have your toilet that tells you
what your poop was like
today. What your poop, you need some vitamin C.
That'd be great. Yeah.
And then they send you out this highly specific vitamin C that, your body needs at that given moment.
I literally invested in a company that is doing that. It's like a smart toilet.
Right.
I don't remember the name of it. I'll have to put it up. But yeah, like people are leaning into that. But yes, this like, so you're saying basically we want a highly techno powered future that maximizes people's choices. And if you want to be...
And that lets humans be humans.
Yes.
And not some sort of...
In all of its diversity.
Yes. Exactly.
Yes. If you want to be a disembodied floating head, go for it.
Go for it.
That's fine.
I don't care.
Yeah. Just don't force it upon me.
Right.
Thank you. And I won't force my mountain stuff upon you.
Right.
Great.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like it. So it feels like with nuclear, the biggest kind of hurdle it's facing right now is its economics. Because to build a new plant, it seems like that's at least a 5, but more like 10, 20 year investment. And that is at odds with the way most sort of funding things, most investors want short-term quick returns, right? Certainly on the scale of years, if not quarters. So what kind of incentive structures have you seen, whether it's like subsidies or so on, that have actually worked and helped make nuclear come faster? Come faster.
I got the question. Nuclear is definitely extremely expensive in the West. That's not the case in China. China is building like traditional large nuclear reactors in about 4 years. And they're building it at a cost that's comparable to methane gas in the United States. Very cheap. But that's China, right? They build everything faster and cheaper. Now let's talk about the United States.
Well, wait, why do they build everything faster and cheaper?
Cheaper labor.
Oh, okay. A little bit
cheaper labor, manufacturing capabilities, materials. They're just generally better at building big infrastructure projects, which the United States has gotten very bad at. The West in general, but especially the United States. And they also have something which every country that has been successful at deploying nuclear at scale has, which is the government is basically the one pushing for the projects. So in the case of France and some other European countries that were successful, the government also owns the utility company, the company that provides electricity for all the people. So they're the ones that initiate the projects. So obviously they're not going to build just a couple of plants. They're going to build several of them. Like in the case of France, they built 57. If you build 57 of anything, you're going to get pretty good at building it at some point, and you're going to get very fast, and you're going to bring the costs down. In the case of the United States, utilities are their own, obviously we have over 30 utilities or something crazy like that. And they each choose their own nuclear project. They each choose their different design. And even in the largest utilities, they're mostly going to build maybe 4, maybe 5 plants. So you don't really get to those economies of scale with only building 5 plants, and the knowledge is mostly lost. There's so many conspiracy theories as to why nuclear got so expensive in the United States, but this is one of the main reasons why. Let's say your utility in the 70s, you built 4 nuclear reactors, you don't need any more electricity. So you just don't build anymore. And the people who have worked on that project that have all the knowledge and know-how, that knowledge is then lost. Nuclear was getting expensive already in the late 70s for a variety of reasons. One of them is changing regulations, but then also supply chain issues and also issues related to the oil shock. Yes, very
Why?
interestingly. When the oil shock happened in the early 1970s, France, for example, went all in on nuclear because they didn't really have other sources of energy. They didn't have any other options. So they had to go nuclear. The United States had good fossil fuel reserves, so they leaned more on that in producing their domestic fossil fuel. Also something to do with interest rates. So the projects were already too expensive by then. After 3 Mile Island, which we talked about in Pennsylvania, there were 120 reactors that were ordered. All of them were canceled. In part because of the public backlash, but also in part because they were already getting expensive. So utilities were like, why the hell are we going to risk building this project that's probably going to be over budget and people are going to try to stop us every single step of the way. So from the early 80s until 2013, there were no new nuclear reactor projects in the United States. Just think about that. The impact of decades of no growth in an industry, right? Imagine all the people that ended up going elsewhere.
Yeah. All that tacit knowledge is lost. The community is broken up.
All of it is lost. You don't have new talent coming in. I had a podcast recently with a guy who was telling me that he thought about studying nuclear engineering. This was in the mid 2010s. And he went to the nuclear engineering department and it was just like cobwebs and like 2 people. It was so depressing. So he ended up going into mechanical engineering, I think. And so we've only built 2 reactors in the last 3 decades in the United States. I know. Vogtle 3 and 4 in Georgia.
And they're like running over big time, right?
And they were supposed to cost $15 billion. They ended up costing 36. Not very good.
No.
It also took them about 13 years to be completed since they started with the plans to build a reactor and so on. And so when people talk about nuclear being too expensive, they usually talk about something called the levelized cost of electricity, which is just a metric that tries to compare the cost of electricity from different generating sources. It does that for every source of energy. And so nuclear's LCOE in the United States ranges between $140 to $180 per megawatt hour. Just remember that number. For utility scale solar, it's between $60 to $120 per megawatt hour. So a lot cheaper. If you're talking about utility scale solar plus batteries, it's between $100 to $200 per megawatt hour. So you're getting already, if you're adding batteries, which is only fair because if you're comparing very intermittent source of energy, right? Like solar with nuclear, you have to add the costs of making it more reliable. So that's already getting to costs that are competitive with nuclear, right? And for rooftop solar, the LCOE is about $150 to $300 per megawatt hour. So a lot more expensive. And so people point to levelized cost of electricity to say, see, nuclear is the most expensive source of electricity, but it doesn't take into account a lot of different things. For example, it doesn't take into account that for renewables, you have to build a lot more transmission lines because you can't buy just a huge patch of land in the city to build a solar farm. It's usually more remote. And so you have to build transmission lines, which are very expensive, very slow as well. So once you add the cost of transmission lines, that LCOE goes up for renewables. It also doesn't account for the fact that after 30 to 40 years, the levelized cost of electricity for nuclear really goes down because they have recovered the initial huge upfront cost of building the plant. And by that point, it's only the operating and maintenance plus fuel cost, which is comes down to $40 to $60 per megawatt hour. And nuclear plants can run for up to 80 years. While renewables, like solar and wind turbines, you have to replace the whole infrastructure every 20 to 30 years. So that's why I don't like to focus on levelized cost electricity so much, to talk about why nuclear is too expensive. But it is a huge problem to solve, because to your point, most companies don't want to make these huge investments that they're not going to see the return for 30 to 40 years. So that's where the government can really come in and help. So the US government, already under the Biden administration, had passed the Inflation Reduction Act that would give subsidies and tax credits for nuclear projects. And now the Trump administration is keeping all of those incentives. They're just changing a little bit the dates. So if you start your nuclear project after 2034, you don't get any of the tax credits. They're basically saying, get your shit together.
Right. Do it now.
Do it now, and then you're going to get the cost of it down. So it's entirely possible, obviously, to bring the cost down, like China is doing it. The United States did it. Even in the 70s, while some of these projects were going up, other projects were very successful and, weren't over budget. So a lot of it comes down to bad project management, honestly, and just not having the know-how. Like Vogtle 3 and 4, this was the first time we built that reactor in the US, and people just didn't know how to build these things.
Yeah, it's called the first of a kind.
It was first of a kind. It was literally first of a kind. So for us to look at the first of a kind nuclear project and say, nuclear is too expensive. Yes, every first of a kind thing is really expensive. So hopefully the way to bring the cost down is just build.
Right, because surely we have the like optimal design down pat now.
That's where people disagree. That's why you see a lot of the small modular reactor stuff coming up. So what happened was, we weren't building nuclear because it was too expensive. You can't justify $32 billion to build one reactor. So they're like, what if we make the reactors smaller? So that even if it is expensive, it's $1 billion. It's not $32 billion.
The error bars are smaller.
Right. Which makes sense, right? However, it fails to understand that we tried small reactors in the past. In the 50s, the US government tried to build a bunch of small reactors. And what happened was that they were too expensive. They couldn't compete on a megawatt hour basis with fossil fuels, because you have, maintenance costs and security costs and all of those things. And a lot of these exotic reactor designs, they're very technically challenging. So they would have to be turned off all the time for maintenance and repairs and corrosion and all of these things. So also a lot of these small modular reactors back then, they operated at very low capacity factors. So they were only producing the maximum amount of electricity a small percentage of the time. And the reason why we ended up with big reactors is because they realized that if we just made it a little bit bigger, it would be able to compete with fossil fuels. And that's how we got to 1 gigawatt. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't possibly figure out a way to solve all of those technical issues and make the small reactors able to compete with fossil fuels.
Right, and presumably the landscape is now different as well. Although I guess we have more natural gas now, which is also it's like the cheapest, right?
I would say that it was much easier to compete with fossil fuels in the 50s and 60s than it is nowadays. Probably, right?
I don't know.
Right. But I would imagine. If you have the tech, they were just like cowboying in these nuclear reactors,
True.
Very fewer regulations. You name it. It was just way easier to build. The Army had these like micro reactors, portable micro reactors that they would bring with them to power remote bases and stuff like that. It was just cheaper to have diesel generators. And that's what they did because they couldn't justify the cost. And I'm going to be honest, I talk to a lot of nuclear engineers and people who run these companies, and they'll tell me, I know it's never going to be able to compete with fossil fuels or with large nuclear. It's just never going to be able. but it can be used for remote locations or, very niche applications like industry and stuff like that, like powering some industrial application or something. So all of that to say, while it is very exciting, we don't know. It's a big unknown and it's a big if. And I think it's a huge mistake to only focus on small modular reactors and totally forget about a technology that we have made almost perfect in the 7 decades, since the discovery of nuclear fission. Nuclear reactors are incredibly reliable. They run at full capacity almost all the time, like 94% of the time, which is crazy. But this happened over decades and decades of optimizing fuel and figuring out little kinks. We don't know how long that would take with small reactors. And we don't know that we would ever get there to a point where it's competitive with fossil fuels. So I'm happy with what we have right now in the US government, which is they're allowing all these new reactor companies to go to the Idaho National Labs or some other federal land, build their prototype. If they've proven it's safe, if they prove that it works, then they can get a license and they can go sell their power. I'm happy with that. In the meantime, we're also building the large reactors that we know work and that we've made safe, that we've made incredibly reliable as well.
Yeah, the good old trusty boys.
They're the good man.
They're like the Labradors.
We need the good man. No, they're not the Labradors, because the Labradors are like, no, it's like a solid.
Yeah, they're like the Shire horses.
Yes.
Yeah, big, yeah. And it's fine. You can go build your little race horses and fun things, have fun with them. But let's not kick the old Shire horses out when they're still
And
trusty.
maybe in 50 years, we're all going to have just, all these little crazy horses. Who knows? But we can't just turn away right now.
Right.
At a point where...
But is it really an either or? Again, we're coming back to this idea of like these sort of false zero-sum thinking. Like we can, because now you hear of Facebook and Google and Amazon, they're all investing in small modular reactors because they need clean energy to power their data centers, and I like that they're doing that. Like that is investment going into that.
The small modular reactors?
Yeah.
Well, that's like they're going to buy the electricity if they build them.
Oh, I see.
Some of them are investing in the companies as investors, but the majority of them are just making contracts that say, if you build your reactor and sell me electricity at this cost, I will buy it from you.
I see. So they're actually not doing the hard work themselves.
They're not doing the hard work
and
themselves.
they're going to build the data center either way.
Exactly.
And they'll probably just then power it with whatever filthy electricity they can get their hands on.
I also think that they're going to be able to buy electricity at much higher costs than, let's say, a utility, right? Because utilities are just, they're rich and they're going to pay whatever for. But what if you can't build a reactor? What if you build a reactor, but you're not going to make money, selling at that cost, at that price? So there are a lot of ifs, and you say it's not an either or. Yes, however, it took a lot of effort from a lot of people saying what I just said to get to a point where anybody even considered building a large reactor. Because for the last 10 years or so, it was all about, forget about large nuclear, it's dead, it's all about small modular reactors. So it's important to keep repeating it, because I think the vibe is like, oh, forget about it. It's old technology. Let's just build the new stuff.
Yeah.
That we have no idea if it's going to pan out or not.
Because what excites me about the idea of nuclear is it's a lot of potential for it to become almost a circular economy. Because I was reading into like the idea of the thorium fuel cycle, and these Gen 4 breeder reactors that actually produce more fuel than they consume. So that like feels kind of like perpetual motion style breaking physics. Essentially, it's like if you can get one of these boys going, you're truly creating like limitless clean energy. Plus, then so you can basically take spent fuel and turn it into new fuel. Is that just science fiction, pie in the sky stuff that I'm barking up the wrong tree, or is there some truth to this? And can you talk through like where, like what can be done to incentivize more of that?
There's definitely a lot of hype on all of those topics. Mm-hmm. So like the thorium, for example, we call them thorium bros. But
So niche.
so niche. But there's a lot of people in the nuclear space, advocacy space, that came to nuclear because of thorium, myself included. The first tweet I saw was talking about a molten salt thorium reactor.
Oh my God, you're a thorium hoe.
I'm a thorium bro, I guess. Yeah.
You should make merch for that, thorium hoe.
Yeah, well, I'm not anymore because
Former with a strike through.
yeah, so there's like all this like, oh, thorium is 3 times more abundant than uranium. And like, yes, but when you talk about the reserves that are economically mineable, let's just say, it's the same. Plus there is a lot of uranium in the ocean, not a lot of thorium in the ocean. So it's like, it's kind of a useless statistic.
Okay.
In some places like China, yes, they have a lot of chunky thorium reserves, so it might work for them. But ironically, China is not building a bunch of thorium reactors. They have one experimental thorium reactor, just building the technology. Out of those 150 that they're building in the next, at this point, 12 years, most of them are just large light water reactors, which is the boring old stuff. So I think that should tell you something, right? Mm-hmm. We've also run reactors on thorium. Indian Point in New York, actually, which was shut down not that long ago. At one point, they ran on thorium. It was just more expensive. Thorium is not fissile, so it needs to decay into something else to be converted into uranium-233, I believe. So that's why, and people say, oh, it's better for non-proliferation. Yes, it takes a couple more steps, but it's not fully proliferation proof as well. So there's a lot of hype around it. I think, unfortunately, what I've learned is a lot of it just comes down to cost and to what is economically viable at any given point. And it's easy to make up all this conspiracy theories as to why we didn't use thorium. Oh, it's because it's not easy to make bombs with. No, it was just more expensive. But I'm definitely super pro innovation. So I'm excited that the US government now is pushing all these new companies to go into, the middle of nowhere and build their reactors and let's experiment with it. I'm all for that. If at the same time we're still building the large ones. In terms of the waste, again, there's a lot of also fluff around it. Like nuclear waste can be recycled, just like plastic can be recycled. But it's very expensive. It's very challenging. It creates a whole other type of waste, which is liquid waste from chemical processes that you need to do basically to separate the uranium from the actinides and fission products and stuff like that. So all of this stuff is really complex, and I wish I had yes, it's going to be fully circular and we're going to, have mining-free nuclear in the future. I think in reality, it's always more complicated than that. And I don't like when that's used to distract from the conversation and gets people excited about something that doesn't exist and gets the focus away from things that we know work.
Yeah, I mean, it's again a sort of an ill of no, not an ill. It's a tendency we have as a species to always focus on the new shiny thing.
Totally.
And just get bored of the current thing because we can be progress focused without throwing out the good stuff that we already have.
Yes.
Sometimes it's just once you've actually solved it.
Right.
That's what you're effectively arguing for, that nuclear energy is effectively solved.
Yes.
It's just we need to set up our economic system, the incentive structures so that we think more long-term. So that our economic system will invest in things that have long-term benefits and stop being so short-sighted.
And also the nuclear industry in the West has to get their shit together and build stuff, be better project managers and build stuff on time. There are a couple of companies trying to solve for that by, creating developer shops for nuclear projects. So that means they can build 40 reactors in the United States so they can carry that knowledge forward and bring the costs down in that way instead of just building 4 and having all of that knowledge concentrated in utilities and so on. So there are people trying to solve for that. But yes, the technical part of it, of how to make a lot of clean electricity, we have solved.
Why don't you start a nuclear school?
Oh, wow.
That's literally like fast-tracking smart engineers, kind of like a Khan Academy or something like that, but for nuclear. Have you considered that? Because you have a nuclear scaling initiative, right? It's a non-profit.
Yes. Yeah, that's more policy focused, and that's more like advocacy policy focused. But I do try to share all of these experiences online as much as I can, because there's so much excitement right now around nuclear. And there are so many companies out there that are, very ambitious, very bold, but that everybody who understands anything about nuclear engineering will tell you this is never going to pan out. And not because they think it is, because they can point to a previous company that tried doing the exact same thing, and there has been no advance in material sciences. And then we talk to those people, and you bring up the issues that those companies faced in the past, and they'll act completely shocked because they didn't know about it. So then they didn't even study, the things that made the technology they're trying to build not work in the past. That's what's so concerning to me. But again, it almost makes me sound like I'm anti-progress, which I'm really not. I just don't like when it takes all the oxygen in the room.
Right. Complete pivot. Tell me about writing a book. What was it like?
Hell.
Was it really that bad?
It's pretty bad.
What was the worst part of it?
So the first conversation I had about the book was in April of 2022. So this is 3 years ago. And I didn't really want to write a book, but I felt like I needed to write an accessible book about nuclear, because right now, if you go and try to buy a nuclear book, it's just, the options are very limited.
Dry.
Or very dry, or very technical, just not written for the average person. I don't like using that word, but for the average person. And I started the process, and our mutual friend, Simon Sinek, said, "You're going to hate it. It's going to be so painful. But when it's done, you're going to be incredibly proud of yourself and glad and all those things. But just don't forget that you're going to hate it." And I started writing the book, and, I created an outline, and I started writing the chapters. And for months, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. This is so fun and so easy, because you're just putting down information. But then you start the editing process of the hardest part is ensuring there is a flow to it. That you're not just starting at something completely different in a new chapter. And also ensuring that it's exciting for the reader, right? Because you might want to start the book with some technical thing, but that's not really exciting for the reader. You don't get a lot of attention with that. So the editing process of just trying to ensure that all the transitions were smooth. And then this is the hardest thing, is if you change anything, all of the transitions come undone. And so you have to go through all of it again. And so that means you have to read your book hundreds of times. And when do you read a book from beginning to end in one sitting? Never, right? And so you constantly keep going back to it and starting from the beginning. And I have to say, I used to read books and get to some page and say, oh my God, this person already wrote this 1,000 times. Why are they writing this again? But now that I've written my own book, I understand. And it's because it's really hard to get the full thorough line in one sitting. So you just have to write your book in chunks.
And so you might naturally repeat
You might miss, and there's only so many, obviously it goes through 1,000 editors and so on, but there's only so much that people can catch and bring it up to your attention, even because they might think it's something.
I remember there was one moment when, because I think you sent me a chapter to have a look over, and I was like, this is so good. Wow. You must be nearly done. I thought all the other chapters are of this style. And you were like, yeah. And then we spoke a couple of weeks later, and you're like, my editors told me, oh no, I think it was actually Simon said, it's like, no, your beginning is not, it needs to be changed in this way. And then you were like, you basically almost had to like rewrite the whole thing. Or
literally the whole thing. Yes.
That must have been a dark moment.
Yeah, so it was Simon. He very graciously offered to take a look at certain parts of the book. And I said, okay, let's start with the beginning. So I read it to him, like the first chapter. And he's like, bad sign. And then he just goes, why are you telling me this? And I go, what are you talking about? He's like, why are you telling me all of this? I don't care about this. He goes, nobody's going to care about this subject. I was starting with energy. Mm-hmm. Why energy is important. Yeah. Why energy is important, how it works. He's like, nobody gives a fuck about this. You need to start with something that intrigues people, that makes them curious to want to learn more. You can get into,
and it relates to them, I guess.
It relates to them, where it's just like something that is interesting, or a story or something like that, instead of just facts. And then you can go into the facts and stuff way later in the book, which was great advice in hindsight, but caused me a lot of pain because I had to completely restructure the book, which means the whole thing it was a new book. So then I worked for months and months on restructuring all of that, and it takes a long time. And then even when you're done with that, I still go through the book and I think of things I would change.
So what was the best bit about it? I mean, it hasn't technically released yet while we're recording this, so I guess you haven't had that big reward yet. But
yes,
so far,
I don't know. I'm curious to see how people react.
You like first held it in your hands?
Oh, the book.
Was that like a moment, or was it actually kind of like whatever?
By that point, I had seen the cover proofs and all this stuff, but it is very cool to hold it in your hands and see the illustrations and the cover and the blurbs and everything together. And what I like about it the most is I think the cover is stunning. So what I envision is that people will look at the cover and be like, wow, what is this book? And then read the subtitle, The Untold Story of Nuclear Electricity and How It Will Save the World. And then go to the blurbs and be like, these blurbs are insane, but also amazing.
Just to read one out. Tech that helps the planet? That's hot. Rad future is smart, bold, and genuinely hopeful. Boemeke makes the case for nuclear electricity in a way that's fresh and inspiring. Paris Hilton. You got Paris Hilton to blurb your book. This is incredible. Michael Bloomberg, Simon Sinek, Tim Urban, of course, former win-win guest. Grimes, almost a win-win guest. Long story there. This is amazing. Paris, how did he get Paris interested in nuclear?
She's a big tech investor. Obviously extremely smart and accomplished woman. And what I like about Paris is you look at her, you look at the character she played for many years as this like dumb blonde girl, but she's an incredibly smart businesswoman. And that's what I felt like we connected over. It's, Isodope content is silly and funny and all of these things, but it's talking about a serious topic, and I'm doing serious work as well. So that's how I sold her on it.
Awesome. So would you recommend to me, who've been thinking about doing a win-win book, to do it or not?
Yes. I mean, it's going to be hell, but it's worth it.
Do you think, the thing I worry about is where everyone's attention spans are so short. And actually that's why I like the way you've structured it, because you've got the TLDRs in there. You've made it for the current gen, like the modern times. But that's what worries me is like, do people even read books anymore?
Even if they don't read the book, which a lot of people won't, some people will read parts of it. You can get a photo of a section and post online. You can go on podcasts and talk about it. So you're still finding a way to share the ideas. And I have to say, even if nobody read the book, it would still be valuable for me as a thinking process. Nothing will make you really explore your ideas in the same way that writing a book does. Because you're just, in something like an essay, it's shorter, it's lower commitment. It's, for some reason, having it printed on a piece of paper makes it that much more serious. And I think it makes you think harder through your ideas.
So to finish up, we didn't do this last time. Rapid fire predictions.
Oh my God. Predictions?
Yes.
I'm terrible at that stuff. Okay,
Good.
let's go.
It's fine.
Just
First
purely
number,
based on vibes.
Vibes, first number that comes into your head. Your intuition's probably actually, you're one of the, I'd say, most calibrated intuition people on this topic because you've just, as you said, just written a book. But yeah, first number that pops into your head. Okay. COP28 gave a goal of tripling global nuclear capacity in the world by 2050. Probability that we actually achieve that goal by 2050.
65.
Probability that Germany will reverse its anti-nuclear policy and begin the planning process for a new nuclear reactor by 2030.
26.
Germany. Probability that by 2035, China's installed nuclear capacity will be greater than that of the US and France combined.
Ooh, US and France combined. By 2035?
So 10 years.
I don't remember the numbers. I would have to look it up. Let's just say 59.
Okay. Probability that the first commercial small modular reactor in North America or Europe will be connected to the grid and delivering power by 2030.
0.
Wow.
Like commercial, like a utility
commercial.
bought it.
Yes.
Not like a prototype. 0.
Okay, what's your date that is your 50-50 point where you're like, it could happen by then?
35, 36.
That's not that far away then. So like within 10, 15 years?
You could have one that like some data center bought and they connected it, But now if you're saying probability that by 2035, you're going to have scalable small modular reactors that are competing with fossil fuels, I think that goes down to like 20%.
Probability that by 2030, public support for building new nuclear power plants in the US will consistently poll above 80%. Right now, we're polling at around 60 to 70% favorability.
By what date?
2030, so 5 years.
Above 80%. 45.
So you think we're like kind of reaching the max favorability?
The highest approval rate for nuclear was 62%. It was a year before Fukushima.
Oh, shit.
And then it went down. And now it's at 61% according to Gallup. But so it's 1 point behind. But to consistently poll over 80, I think it's something that is going to take a little bit longer, especially because we need more reactors being built and people seeing the benefits and all of that.
We haven't talked about fusion, but probability that a commercial fusion plant will achieve sustained net energy gain and deliver electricity to the grid by 2040.
Again, could be a prototype.
Well, that it's connected to the grid.
But it's not something that is like, it's cheap. It's like, not even, okay, yeah.
But it's going, it's above Q or whatever, and it's a net positive.
By 2040?
Yeah.
This one I really don't know. Mainly because I have no idea how the advances in AI are going to influence fusion research. I would say low, like lower than 50.
Probability that we have AGI by 2040.
Ugh.
It's all right. Just your first answer.
100.
Oh, wow. Okay.
By 2040, that's like 15 years away. Yeah.
Okay. By 2030.
46.
Probability that we survive it.
As in like the human species as we know it makes it for another 500 years. I don't know. This is way up, like.
You can reject the question.
Okay, I'll reject the question.
Some people reject it because I'm effectively asking you P-Doom, and some people just don't want to answer it, and I respect that.
Yes, I will reject the question.
Okay. Probability that aliens visited us in the last 100 years?
Putting me on the spot here. Have you read?
You don't answer the question with a question.
Probability that aliens have visited Earth in the last 100 years.
However you define alien.
65%.
Probability that you write another book in the next 10 years.
47%.
Ooh. Okay. So you really are a glutton for punishment.
The process is really cool. And once you write a book, I feel like you have ideas for a second book.
Right. It's kind of like birthing a child. You know, if you've given birth once, it's like, well, it was rough. I didn't enjoy pregnancy, but I can do this again.
Yes, I'll do it again.
Yeah.
Because the upside is pretty cool.
Yeah. And you haven't even tasted the real upside yet.
Right.
We haven't actually had the release and the party. Any messages you want to give the Win-Win fans to leave them with?
You made me really go down the P-Doom rabbit hole.
You're spiraling now. Oh shit.
No. My message is that the main thing we should try to do in the next couple of decades is to keep the future human.
Amen to that.
Oh, and that Techno Pastoralism is really cool.
Yes. Let's lead the way. I think we should start making art of it. And
I tried AI art. It's very poor. I need to hire a proper artist.
Nice. See?
There you go.
Yeah. Yes. Keeping humans in the loop.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I love you. Thank you for coming.
You too.